Hey everybody, welcome to the For the Youth podcast. My name is Zack. We're really excited to have some conversations here on this podcast that we haven't yet figured out how to have in church, like on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday night. We just haven't figured out the right way to do that. And so we're stuffing some of those conversations into a podcast format like this one today. Today we're going to be talking about dating in church, and I'm really excited to do that. We're going to have some conversations about, is dating a sin? Maybe you've heard that before. Is it wise to date somebody? What do you do if you're dating someone who goes to the same church? Like you see them all the time, you do life together. And we'll get into boundaries. We're going to get into all of that. But I want to go ahead and introduce our guests for today. Two of my good friends, Campbell and Sophia Falk. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Glad to have you guys here. This is going to be a lot of fun. So I've known them for quite a while. And, if you're watching right now or listening to this podcast and you grew up here at Westside, you probably know these guys already. If you're not local to the Gainesville area, you might not know them, but they are integral parts of our ministry working with middle and high school students in the Gainesville area. So I just want you guys to go ahead and introduce yourself, give it 30, 60 second intro, and then I'm going to start pulling out your story, and I'm going to explain why you guys are like the authority on dating in church. I know that you love.
I love it.
I could say expert if you prefer.
So wise.
Yeah, so wise, full of all the wisdom, infallible. Some would say no. Anyways, so who wants to go first? Introductions, Campbell or Sophia?
Campbell.
Did I mention you guys are married?
No.
They're married guys.
Yeah.
And I'm Zack. I don't know how to run a podcast. But anyway, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. So I'm Campbell. I came to Westside when I was 15. And I went to Movement Youth under Asa Walker and Zack Jernigan.
Old Asa.
Old Asa.
The man, the myth, the legend.
And Zack Jernigan actually helped me get connected into the youth group whenever he met me and my dad for coffee at Starbucks on Archer Road. I'll never forget this.
Yes. Dude, and I forgot that. I just went trip down memory lane.
Yes.
That was because you're older than 15 now.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
Maybe a few years older.
Yeah.
But just like that moment is whenever I really started to get involved in church. So like from that point on, that's kind of drew me into movement, started making me question
You just karate
God.
chopped our microphone,
I did.
dude. Come on.
I'm
messing with you.
This is Satan he was attacking, but we'll cut that.
You got involved.
I got involved. And I started to, see relationships be built in Christian families that I didn't understand, not growing up with that. So that just kind of started pulling me closer into church and making me question more about Jesus. So and
then by your junior or senior year, you'd met Sophia.
I didn't meet Sophia till college.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So I see you guys growing up like kind of parallel, but the dots didn't necessarily connect right away.
No,
Okay,
I didn't even know she went to Movement Youth.
Right.
Until
Who is
college.
Sophia? Yeah. I'm tracking with you. Okay. Sophia, do you want to share some of your testimony, or is there anything you wanted to add on there? We're going to pull out all the details one way or another before the end of this podcast.
Yeah, it'll be on the table.
Yeah, it'll all be there. So, Sophia, what about you? You go next.
Okay, so I started coming when I was 16, which Campbell came when he was 15, but he's older than me. He's an old man, so we didn't end up meeting until later in college. But I started coming when I was 16.
Robbing the cradle, man. I'm
Oof.
I came because actually Josh Hartman invited me to come when we were juniors in high school. So I started coming, and I kind of knew who Jesus was. Growing up, my parents talked about it a little bit, but, we didn't go to church. Maybe we would be called like the CEOs. We went Christmas and Easter, but I learned a lot from my grandparents, and they always talked to me about Jesus. So then I started coming, and I was like, I don't really know how this is real, but I came at a point in my life where I was just honestly really depressed and didn't really know if I had a purpose in life and why I was here, and started coming. I realized that Jesus was real and that I did have a purpose. So Movement Youth really, you and Asa, because I also came when you and Asa were still youth pastors. So you guys really taught me and set that foundation of who Jesus was and what he meant to me. So then I got baptized in Movement Youth and been here most of the time since.
That's awesome. And then you guys got involved in the college ministry. Now you're not technically college age anymore.
No.
Like you're getting old. I don't know how to tell you this. It's kind of depressing because you're like, when you're like 24, 25, you're like, no, I'm still kind of college-y. No, you're not. You're old. You got a job and it moves on. But anyways, I'm not trying to bum you guys out. You guys, I think are a unique case study for us to look at when we're talking about dating because you guys started dating here at this church. You were both involved as youth in this church, and neither one of you guys really grew up in a churched environment, like in a church home. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun. I think it's going to be beneficial to a lot of us. Some of us watching or listening, maybe you're thinking like, hey, I don't really want to date anybody right now. That's fine. I think you can tuck some of this wisdom away for later. Yep. And, you know, they've figured it out. We've all made a few mistakes, and we've found the right answers the hard way sometimes. So you can learn from our failures and our wisdom that's, been hard fought. But maybe you're like, I want a boyfriend yesterday, or I want a girlfriend right now. Like we might be able to encourage you, I guess is a way to say it. Campbell's like, yeah, that's one word to describe it.
Encouragement's a great
encouragement is what we're going to try to do here. Yeah. So I want us to start off by just like blanket question. This might take us a little bit to unpack. Is dating in church a good thing? Is dating in church a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a sin? Is it a wonderful thing that everybody should do? Who wants to take a stab at that first? And let's start breaking that down.
I got you.
Go ahead.
So dating is not a sin, but it can be done sinfully.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
I think with everything in life, like there is a right way and there's a good way and there's a better way. Mm-hmm. There's also a bad way to do things. Like I'm going to give like a pretty wide spectrum.
Yeah.
Like there's some gray areas, but I think when it comes to like, should dating be done in church? Yes. If you're a Christian, I don't think you should be dating someone who's not a Christian.
Right. You're like, well, Jesus talked about that. He said, you definitely want to get married to somebody who's not a Christian. You're going to be unequally yoked. Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like, I think if you're going to pursue dating, pursue another Christian.
Okay.
First and foremost.
So church could be a great place to do that.
Could be a great place.
You're like, or it's like Kevin from The Office. Like, I have a girlfriend. She goes to another church.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So you date people, but only people from other churches. I think that could be, I don't know. I don't think that's enough. I know some people. Never mind. I'm going to start spilling details. Sophia, sin, not sin, good thing, great thing, horrible thing. What's your take?
I think it really depends on your intention behind wanting to date. So I'd say dating in the church isn't sinful, but I think that two people could be doing the exact same thing, and one could be sinful and one could be not, depending on the intention behind what they're doing and what they're thinking.
Yeah. We were talking about this on a Wednesday a few weeks ago. We were saying, there are a lot of things that aren't sin, but that doesn't mean that they're not stupid. It doesn't mean that they're not wise, and so just asking, is this a sin, doesn't necessarily mean, oh, it's not a sin? Well, then I'm going to do it right now. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to say, hey, this is when, it could be a sin. This is when it could just be unwise. Here's maybe when you should wait a little while before you start dating somebody. And it's not just about age. We're going to break down some of that. But when you guys were dating, when you guys started dating each other, I should say, what were some like things that you were using or resources that you had found to inform you on how to date the right way? Because both of you were followers of Jesus when you started dating, right? Right.
Yes.
So if you're saying, hey, I'm a Christian, how do I date as a Christian? Where were you going to try to find those answers?
Well, I think one thing we both did unintentionally actually was we listened to another podcast. It was by Ben Stewart, and it was called Single, Dating, Engaged, Married.
He's at Passion Church, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Passion City. Mm-hmm. Whatever.
He left.
The one about passion.
Yeah.
So he recorded a podcast when he was at Texas A&M, and it was all about the different stages. So I think we both listened to that, and kind of Ben Stewart was able to provide some scriptures just to look at. And again, like the Bible doesn't necessarily talk about dating. Like it talks a lot about singleness and it talks a lot about marriage. There's not too much on dating, but there is like a different like way to handle situations that the Bible talks about. So I think we kind of listened to that and kind of helped our foundation of thoughts behind dating. I think we talked to other friends who have dated before, Christians who we really admired their relationship. Mm-hmm. We talked to them. I think we talked to older mentors who are married and who we felt like really know what they're talking about. So we were able to get advice and wisdom from them and be like, hey, here's a situation. This is what we're thinking. Like, I don't know if I want to, date Campbell or not, or like, I'm unsure about this that we're doing in dating. And like, what do you think? Someone who's been there, someone who's wise, someone who knows better. And also our friends too, who know us best.
What do you think now, having married? You think dating him was an okay idea?
It was all right.
It worked out okay, I guess. It could have been worse. Yeah. Campbell, anything to add? Like you or Sophia, anything to add to Campbell's story? Like you guys both kind of gave us a little bit of your feedback. And I mean, you guys are married for crying out loud. Like you get to argue with each other all day long. If you're like, I don't know, Campbell, I think you could have missed something there.
So I think, yeah.
What did I miss?
The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller.
Oh yeah. Well, that came in later.
Yeah, that's part of the story.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was probably, was that like...
It was later, but
when
we
you were
both
engaged?
read it.
Yeah.
Okay, you both read it.
We both read it
Gotcha.
prior. I think...
One thing I want to add is we also read the Bible, and that's the most important thing we did. I don't know if I made that
That's the answer we
clear.
were looking for.
I was about to...
Ding, ding, ding.
I was...
I was just thinking about what I said, and I was like, wait a second, I didn't say that. I guess my brain was
Are
like,
you
that's
even
obvious.
saved? Oh my
You know,
goodness,
I hope
don't-
so.
But anyway...
Yeah. The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller.
Yeah, we read that as well, just to kind of like help give perspective on what the goal was.
Right.
You know?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that word.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
goal of
The goal.
marriage. Okay, I'm tracking with you.
So we were
This is like marriage counseling right now.
It is.
Honey, you forgot to mention.
It's
I'm getting there.
it's funny because prior to the podcast, someone at this couch told me I would do this.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
is Campbell the more talkative one here between the two of you guys? I mean,
Yeah.
I know that. I'm just trying to pull that out for some of
Yes.
our audience. Doesn't know you guys quite as well. So
I just wanted to add, and I was waiting patiently. I didn't cut you off. I just put my hand out so you know I wanted to say something.
we could
I was
have
giving
the
you a
raise,
signal.
raise your hand rule.
I got you.
I
I'll
wanted
raise
to
my
say
hand
that
next.
we also wanted to read that book because our parents didn't have Christian marriages. Campbell's
Yeah.
parents aren't Christians. Mine are divorced. So I think that really kind of helped us. We haven't been able to see a marriage up close and personal. I think I had my grandparents, and I think Campbell also had some mentors and role models that he got to see their marriage up close and personal when he was in high school. But we didn't see our parents live that our whole lives. So I think that book kind of really showed us this is the goal. This is what we're aiming for. Like actual physical steps and not just talking to other people we know.
Yeah, it gave a more detailed account of what I had seen.
Yeah.
So like it took like the marriages that were Christian that I saw and
Right.
like
Kind
contextualize
of put
them.
it into a formula. It's like, here's why that is working. Okay.
And
So we're kind of getting into marriage here, which is good. We're eventually going to get there.
Yeah.
But that's part of the reason I wanted to start by saying, hey, what kind of resources did you guys look into when you had started dating or even before you were dating, while you were dating? And you said the Bible, and then you talked about all these other books, but we don't think of the Bible first because elephant in the room, the Bible doesn't specifically talk about dating, right? It doesn't say, hey, thou shalt date someone in such and such a way. It does. Jesus doesn't specifically say, hey, when you're taking a girl out, make sure that you open the door for her and be a gentleman. Like it doesn't say things like that. And that's not to say that dating is unbiblical any more so than like airplanes are unbiblical. Like they weren't invented yet. Dating wasn't invented yet.
Yeah.
The idea of a teenager really wasn't even invented yet in those time periods. So it doesn't mean that it's silent on the issue. It just means like we've got to jump through some hoops to understand how to apply Christian principles to this thing called dating that we have now. But the Bible is silent on dating in particular. So we've got to say, hey, how do we do this well? How do we do this accurately and fairly? And it's good that you guys have a good idea of marriage because one thing that I want us to look at just for a second, I've got it over here on my notes. I wanted to read some of Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul is talking to the Christians and he says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I feel like you guys could probably quote this to me, but for those of us who don't know this passage, he says, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with the water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. And in this way, husbands, Campbell
Yes.
and Zack,
Yeah.
we need to love our wives as our own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. So if there's one thing we can just give our audience for free, Campbell, as men, as husbands, we know that wherever she wants to go to eat, that's where we're going to go to eat. It says it's right there in the Bible. It's biblical.
Yeah.
Ephesians 4:29, 5:29, 4:29 is something different. Yeah. But here's why. Like I know you guys, and Janae, my wife Janae and I, we got to do your premarital counseling, and so we've had these conversations before, which is why I wanted you on the podcast. You and I know why marriage is so important. But if you're like, wait, we're not talking about marriage, we're talking about dating.
Yeah.
Hold on, because what the Bible says is that marriage is ultimately supposed to be a picture of the gospel for everyone else to look at. So like people, no pressure, people should be able to look at you guys at Campbell and Sophia and then be like, hey, you want to know what God's love is like?
Yeah.
Look at the way that Campbell loves Sophia. Can we tell them, Campbell?
We can.
Because I don't think we're going to be able to hide that failed
Yeah.
fist bump. Campbell, you took a little tumble, didn't you?
I did take a little tumble.
How did that go?
Wow. Poorly. So as most tumbles do.
Right. On your
Longboard.
on your longboard.
Yeah. Because I'm not as young as I once was.
Not quite as spry or
No.
nimble.
No.
So no broken bones, but
Nope.
you did take a pretty hard fall.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I did take a nice little tumble.
I would love to tell you that this is like actually an illustration for the next point, but it's not. I really just wanted to roast you for a second.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Sophia's like, I approve this message.
As a grown man who longboard, I understand. I
Hey,
understand that.
do it while you can. Do it while you can.
I don't know if I can anymore.
I have like a mini, like a baby longboard, penny board.
Yeah.
Not at all the same thing.
No.
I'm not going nearly as fast as you are.
No.
Okay, but back to marriage. We understand that Paul has said like, hey, your marriage is supposed to be a picture of the gospel, so that puts a lot of weight on marriages. It's like, well, you better do it right, or else people are gonna have the wrong ideas about what the gospel is, about what God is like.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about dating, I think we've got to, dating is not the same thing as marriage, and marriage is not the same thing as dating, but we've got to be able to say, look, ultimately, if dating is done well, it's going to end up with a ring on you guys' finger, like the one you got right there. He did a good job on that ring.
I picked it out.
You picked it out.
He did a great job purchasing it.
You did a great job picking it out, and you did a great job purchasing it.
I did a great job.
Yeah, if Campbell would have picked it out, it would have been very extravagant, very fancy.
I mean, it's pretty shiny.
And I wanted something kind of simple.
So ultimately, that's where marriage, or rather, that's where dating is going to end up if we do it right. That being said, I know some people watching or listening, whether you're 15 or 25, might be saying, whoa, I don't see how they're even related. They're like loosely related. I don't necessarily have to marry somebody. Maybe I just want to date somebody to date them. What would you guys say to that? What would you guys say to the idea of just dating for the sake of dating?
I have a wonderful thing for you. Dating is designed to end.
Oh,
So if you're going to be dating someone, I just want you to know at some point it's going to end. It can either end in marriage or it can end in heartbreak. It's one of your two choices right there. If you're dating wrong. Now, I will say you can date correctly and walk away unscathed. And I think that's the proper way to date.
It's rare though. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm very blessed in that I've been able to have both experiences.
Right.
To walk away unscathed and then to walk away married. So
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to be able to have that experience. But
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I love that you said it, because you're like, it's designed to end. It's not supposed to be forever. Right. And maybe you guys know people like this. Maybe some of our people watching or listening can think of people who've been dating for like 6 years, 8 years. I know somebody who was dating for 12 years. I haven't stayed in touch with them. I hope they're married now, or I hope they broke up, honestly, because I'm like, what are you doing? These are like grown people with jobs and their own place to live. And I'm like, are you going to like do this thing or what? But somebody said one time, like dating by definition is unsustainable. Right. And especially if we're followers of Jesus, you're like, the more you get to know somebody, the more you like them, the more you're attracted to them, the more that, you don't want to go home to separate houses. You want to live in the same house. You want to sleep in the same bed and eat the same food. And, we know that the Bible's told us there are certain things that are off limits unless you're married, and we don't need to make people blush, but there's that factor too. And so like relationships escalate. And so I guess I would say, I don't know if it's a rule, but when relationships just keep on going and there's no goal in mind, a goal like marriage, I think ultimately you either break up or you compromise. And you say, hey, I know the Bible has said that like we're not supposed to sleep together, we're not supposed to do this or that, but I just like you so much, and I'm not going to marry you right now. But like, there's an element where people just lose self-control because we're routinely putting themselves in front of that temptation. So I don't know, anything else to add to that? Like you said it's just not going to work. It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Any other feedback or advice for somebody who's thinking, I don't even want to think about marriage. I just want to date and see if I like this person, have a good time.
So I think, and I'll let you go after me. I noticed. I apologize.
We can go back to the hand raising rule.
Yeah, we might have to.
We might have to.
Yeah, but I think just kind of like to the person who wants to date but doesn't want to get married. Why?
Why?
Yeah, just why do you want to date?
Yeah.
There might be a deeper issue of like maybe you're trying to find your worth in something outside of Christ. And if you're a Christian, and I'm calling on Christians primarily on this charge.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, if you're looking to date to find worth in another person, if you're looking to date to find some form of fulfillment in that relationship, I think first and foremost, before you can have a healthy dating relationship, let alone marriage, you need to have a strong foundation in Christ. Because that's the only thing that's going to let dating work. That's the only thing that's going to make marriage work.
Yeah. I don't know how people do it. I mean,
yeah.
I would love to say, well, I mean, they get divorced, but Christians honestly get divorced at the same rate that non-Christians do, or almost the same rate.
Yeah.
And I think there's just a real gap in teaching and discipline. Sometimes we've been taught, we just don't do it when it comes to dating and marriage. So this is a really important conversation. You had your hand up or down, or you wanted to say something.
Yes. So I think if you date with intention, the purpose of dating would be to see if you could potentially see yourself marrying that person. Or so like Campbell said, like the goal of dating is, do I want to marry this person? Like if you're not dating with the intention of seeing if you could possibly marry them, then you're dating to break up. Yeah. So if you're dating with no intention, then you're asking to get hurt. Yeah. Right? And I don't think people necessarily, like, they go in mind, they're like, oh, I just want to date this guy just for fun. Like, I would never marry him.
Yeah, well, what's going to happen in 2 years?
Exactly, because then, yes. And I think they're setting themselves up to fail. They're setting themselves up to get hurt. So I think you have to be really intentional and really thoughtful in who you want to date. And I wouldn't date anyone who you couldn't see yourself potentially dating. That doesn't, I mean, potentially marrying. Yeah. I don't think that means you have to know you're going to marry them before you date them. I think you have to date them to figure that out. That's why I think dating is important and that it should be done. But
there's probably some people that, like, you don't even need to date them to know that you wouldn't marry them.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We're like, I can see that they're lazy, verbally abusive to people around them, and they're, not motivated, and they're not even a follower of Jesus, but I'm going to date them to find out if this is the kind of person I should marry. No, you already know. Like, you don't need to. Like they've kind of already had one interview just by existing. They don't need to go to the next level of interviews, which is dating. Yeah. What would you say, Sophia, if somebody is like, if somebody's dating somebody right now that they know or they feel strongly that they could not and would not marry?
I think if they have already prayed about it. So if they're sitting there and they're praying and they're like, and the Lord's kind of spoken to them in however way they hear the Lord, or I think they should do that and kind of see. I think they should also seek advice from their friends who are around them who know them best, and just also wiser advice. Like, I can get advice from my friends who were all college age-ish, a little young adult age, and I think that only goes so far versus someone who is, in the next stage of life beyond this. Once you get that advice, I think if you know for a fact and other people are kind of confirming that, I would say then unfortunately you would have to break up with them. And that may sound sad and that might sound scary and heartbreaking. And as someone who doesn't like confrontation, that's something that would be very hard for me. But at the same time, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time too. Wow, so you're not loving them well by staying in that relationship when you know you wouldn't marry them. Right. You're just hurting them and yourself. So I think it's also important, to, after you pray about, to really talk to people around you, because if you come up with a reason of, I shouldn't marry them because of this, it might not be the right reason. It might just be you overthinking. That's why it's important to have community speak into it too. So I think it's important to get both sides of the coin.
So evaluate all of those things. Talk to some people who know you and this other person well. Someone who's a follower of Jesus, hopefully, who's got some wisdom. But then ultimately, if you need to break up, like, go ahead and do it. And it might be heartbreaking to break up, but it's going to be more heartbreaking if you do that in 3 years when you're even more connected. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Campbell, tell me just a little bit real quickly, what were some of you guys' like expectations or goals for dating? Do you guys have the same goals when you started dating? How did you kind of sync those things up? How'd that conversation go?
So first, before we started dating, we were friends. And like we had a very similar friend group. So I got to see the way she interacted with others, and I got to see how she loved others.
Okay.
So I knew surface level.
Right. She had the first interview.
Yeah, she had the first interview. And I liked what you said. You said something about evaluation.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about dating. Dating is just an evaluation period. You either pass or you fail. And so if you're on one evaluation technique and the other person's on another evaluation technique, you're not on the same page. So you're not reading the same book. So you might not be hitting the same goals, like you were saying. And that being said, like before me and Sophia started officially dating, we had a sit down conversation where we talked about, this is what I believe dating means. This is what I think dating looks like. This is what I think marriage means. This is what I think marriage looks like. Is
that what you think?
Yeah, is that what you think? Like, do you agree with me? If not, maybe not the best idea. Like,
right. That's awesome. Was that a scary conversation to have? Or were you nervous to have it? Or
I personally wasn't nervous.
It's because Campbell had all the power in the situation.
Because he already knew what he was going to say. He initiated the conversation.
Well, I cornered Campbell in his house, and I was like, "Hey, I like you."
Ooh.
And that's not how it exactly happened.
Like a gun or like
yeah,
a knife?
I held a gun to his hand in his house, cornered him to where no one was around.
To his hand. He said, I held a gun to his hand. Yeah. I do think that's kind of funny.
To
like,
his
you better
hand.
not. I'm going to shoot this pinky right off.
Yeah. Well, he's a baker. He needs his fingers.
He does.
But,
Guys, Campbell makes the most amazing cheesecake in the world. Like, I don't care. If you've got a party planned, are you accepting orders?
At the moment, I'm a little booked.
He's a little booked. But if he wasn't, y'all, the only correct answer or course of action would be to book Campbell to make you cheesecake. I'm sorry. What were we saying?
It's okay. I think
he
it
had
was,
the power. Yeah.
He had the power, which is kind of how it should be. But I kind of talked to him and alluded to the fact that I liked him. And we talked about how we were kind of acting. We were flirting with each other. And I asked him, I was like, should we be acting like this if we're not going to pursue anything? I was kind of trying to allude to the point that I liked him and wanted to, without saying all the words, because I don't like confrontation. I was scared. And Campbell's like, no, I haven't noticed anything different the way we've been acting. And so I asked him if he wanted to pursue something, and he took time to think about it and prayed about it. And that was a Saturday night, and we didn't talk again until Thursday. So that's a long time for me to just sit there and wait to see what he was going to say. So I had to wait from Saturday to the next Thursday morning to get coffee with him for us to talk about it. But it was
more of a processor. Is that what I'm catching? Campbell's a processor, or he's like, no, I know what I like and I know what I want, and like
I wanted to pray about it.
You gotta pray about it.
She's missing context.
Of course.
No, I'm not.
Of course. You're like that's her side of the story.
The week prior, I had prayed to God and told him, like, whatever you want with my life, like I was like, just take it. Like I'm handing it all over to you. And I was set on being single for the rest of my life a week before.
And then you pull that stunt.
And so
I really did.
And so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't me just chasing a woman.
Yeah.
That I was like, God, is this actually from you, or is this here to distract me? Like, is this like you know what I mean? Like, is this gonna be like, is this a test?
Is this a test?
Is this like not supposed to happen? But
well, we spent a lot of time together, and I realized I kind of liked him, and I prayed about it. And I said, Lord, open a door if you want me to talk to him. So I went to his house intentionally wanting to talk to him about this, and I had a really good friend just say like, hey, if he doesn't like you, it'll be 2 weeks of awkwardness and it'll be fine. You should just talk to him or you're gonna regret it. And I was like, you're right. That woman is a wise woman. I love her. It might have
been 3 weeks. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. No, Campbell's pretty awkward. It may have been a little longer. But so I got to his house and waiting to talk to him, and I asked him how his day was, and he spent 2 hours talking about how he didn't want to be in a relationship. I hadn't even brought anything up yet, but the door opened, and I prayed for the Lord to open the door, and I knew this was the door. I was like, you know what, I'll just say something, and I asked, Campbell, have you noticed anything different between us lately? Homeboy goes, no, I haven't noticed anything. And I was like, and I had to give him examples. I was like, do you need examples? And he's like, yeah. So I gave him like some examples of like, we were fighting over a dish towel in the kitchen.
And he like winked at you.
Yeah. Very obvious.
I knew it.
Just it like was the movies.
He was trying to be a little secretive about it. He kept it a secret from himself.
Were you guys like reaching for the same thing, and then like your hands touched, and then you like looked up at each other? And then you looked away.
Yeah, and then we had spaghetti, and we had the same strain of spaghetti like Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah.
I'm tracking with you
I
guys.
pushed the meatball over with my nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I
yeah.
pictured that. It was weird. I can't unpicture it. Okay.
Yes.
But you guys had the same goals. You had the same
Correct.
expectations. And you kind of shared that with me before. It was funny when Janae and I started dating. We had both dated other people, like a few other people, and that hadn't really gotten us anywhere, and it had led to more frustration than anything. So I was really, really interested in her. She was like a little bit interested in me. And I sat down and I was like, hey, like, I don't know how to say this, but like, if we're going to date, like, I mean business. Like, I think I actually used those same terms. I was like, I'm not playing games. Because we were older. We were in our college years. We weren't like 14. I was not ready to like buy a ring, of course, like but I was like, hey, I want to like be intentional about saying like, hey, are you the kind of person that I could marry? And then I want you to figure out like, am I the kind of person that you could marry? And I was like, I'm definitely going to scare her off. Like, we'd only been dating a couple of weeks, but I was like, I'm definitely going to scare her off. And she was actually thinking the same thing. So maybe you're thinking like, hey, I need to have that like DTR, define the relationship moment with your significant other, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to scare them off. Maybe, but maybe they're going to like, thank you for just being clear. And now I know what the expectations are.
And if you scare them off, good.
Good. Yeah.
Like
if they scare easily, they're going to make a horrible husband.
Amen.
What are you going to do if there's like a weird noise in the backyard and homeboy's scared? Anyways, that's not, exactly what we're going for. No. But I want to kind of move on. So the goal of dating, we're on the same page. Goal of dating, it's got to be marriage. Doesn't mean you're like, hey, I am starting the marriage process right now. But you're finding out, is this the kind of person that I could marry? If not, don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. Yeah. It's not actually loving. That's the most selfish thing you could do. You're kind of using them if you think about it that way. But let's talk about this. The dating phase for Christians. I think there needs to be some ground rules.
Amen.
And, some guidelines. So what kind of ground rules, guidelines, boundaries, guardrails, whatever term we want to use, what are some good boundaries for dating?
So we're talking primarily to youth.
We're talking mostly middle school, high schoolers. I know for a fact we got some college students listening to this.
Yeah.
Some 40-year-old women, men, moms and dads.
I can give 2 examples of like 2 different boundaries types that I had.
Okay.
One was more of a courtship kind of boundaries. And we had...
Zach has a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between courting and dating? Is it real, or is it just like, no, I'm dating, but I'm a Christian?
So with courtship, the parents were involved.
Oh, okay. Okay, that is different.
Yeah.
That is pretty darn different.
Yeah. The parents were very heavily involved, chaperoned 90% of the dates.
Okay.
And we didn't earn the privilege to have one-on-one dates until a few months in.
Okay.
Just because that was the system that was laid before us.
Yeah. Like, and if you're going to do anything, these are the rules.
And I think especially for Christians, if you have a strong family, ask your parents to help with that.
Yeah.
Because they have a strong marriage if they're a strong Christian.
Yeah,
like, if your parents have a strong marriage, help them
figure that out.
Yeah, help them help you, because they know something you don't.
Right. And maybe you're like, there's no shot I'm going to let my mom and dad go on a date with me. And maybe that's actually not the worst idea in the world. But at the very least, you need to involve them.
Oh, yeah.
Campbell, are we on the same page? Like, if a guy's going to ask a girl out, homeboy needs to ask her dad.
Yeah.
Ask her dad. If she doesn't have a dad living at home, like, ask mom, ask grandma, ask somebody, like whoever's like in charge of her, the authority figure in her life.
I'm old school. So
instant respect.
I'd say if you have the opportunity to ask the father type deal.
Yeah.
Or the person in charge. With Sophia, I didn't have the opportunity. Her parents
Sure.
They weren't in the picture. And we were also adults, so it was like a weirder. She was moved out. It was a different dynamic. I did ask permission to get married, but yeah,
that's a big one.
I think something to add with the courtship, if you don't have parents who are Christians, because we didn't, is you can still go and you can ask people in the church to kind of fulfill that role, and it would be different, but still at least.
Can we come hang out at your house and have dinner?
Yeah, and having them speak into your relationship, being open and honest with the things going on, the good stuff and the bad stuff, and having them speak life into your relationship. It's really important. And that's something that we did with a family that we know who were able to speak into our lives and kind of got to see the process from the beginning to the end. Yeah. Not that it's really ended, but we got married. So, but the end of the dating process, they got to see the whole thing and speak into it.
Are they still with us?
Yes.
They're still alive?
Yes.
Okay, it hasn't ended.
I'm talking about the Sontags.
I know.
Oh, the Sontags are great. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was like, who is this? What ended?
Our dating life ended.
Yeah, their dating life. Your dating life ended. Yeah.
I just couldn't help but
date
chuckle.
your wife. You're like, you got to keep dating. Come on, guys. No,
Yeah,
I
Campbell.
want to unpack that for just a second because some of again, I work with middle and high schoolers. I know you guys work with middle and high schoolers, and we know that somewhere on the other side of this screen, somebody's going, no shot. I'm going to go on a date with my parents, and that's all you're hearing, and you're not really listening. Like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe that's not for you right now. Maybe it should be, but maybe you're not going to go there. At the very least, I think what we need to take away from this is involve some older, wiser people, preferably your parents if they're following Jesus. Your parents want you to have a healthy dating relationship. Yeah. They're not out to ruin your fun. They're not out to make your life miserable. They love you way more than that person, you're trying to be alone with does. And so I think also there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, if I'm not alone with them, I'm not going to find out what they're really like. There might be a smidge of truth. Like you do eventually need some alone time, but a lot of people like who their significant other is one-on-one. But then when they're around other people, they're like, wow, my boyfriend's kind of a jerk. My husband or my wife is actually kind of like really mean around other people. And I didn't see that when we were dating. Yeah. So it's also just really valuable to see that significant other interact with their family, with a group of people they don't know. Because, sometimes that's a little bit different version of them that you don't get a chance to see. So courting, dating, I'm sorry. What are some other boundaries?
So I think one is if someone has a personal conviction, like one person, I think both parties should respect that. Like if someone has a stricter boundary, that person with the stricter boundary should never loosen that stricter boundary. Type deal. I think you should match them. Be like, right. Okay, this person's not comfortable with this. Right. Then I'm not going to force them. Yeah. Like, I think that's a good rule. I'm not sure what I can say
as like a for example. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Well, we could work with some hypotheticals. Yeah, kissing or saying like, hey, maybe somebody's dating a guy or a girl who's not convicted. They're like, hey, I think kissing's fine. It doesn't really bother me. I've kissed other people. But if someone's like, hey, I think that might be sin for me. Yeah. Probably shouldn't go there. Probably and you certainly shouldn't pressure somebody. Like I was saying, just a few weeks ago, we talked about gray areas in the Christian faith. I think you could say like, hey, dating, and dating certainly a gray area, but kissing, holding hands, things like that are maybe a little bit of a gray area. Yeah. Some people, they could be a sin. At some moments, they could be a sin. Sometimes they're unwise. But why don't we do this? Let's kind of break some of these up into like, hey, physical guardrails or boundaries, physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, and we could say even spiritual boundaries. Yeah. So we're talking about kissing.
We're talking about physical.
Physical boundaries right now. I always hear people ask, how far is too far?
That's a great question. If you're asking it, that's too far.
Yeah. If you're asking the question, how far is too far? Probably farther than, you already are right now. If you're asking how far is too far, you're probably saying, how much can I get away with? And I don't think that's the right way to be asking that question. And instead, you could be asking, hey, what's best? What is what? Again, we're talking about dating in church, dating if you're a follower of Jesus. Yeah. I think if a follower of Jesus is asking that question, they should be saying, hey, what does God want most? What honors God most? Yeah. What's going to help me stay pure? What's going to help me, prepare myself and this person for marriage? Yeah. Even if it's different people. So I think whenever we dance around this question, people are like, oh, you sound like you're being legalistic, but that's stupid. Because we have rules for businesses, and we make plans for businesses and athletic teams. And you said something that made me think about this earlier, Sophia. There's a saying that says if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think a lot of times we just go into a dating relationship with no plan, no rules, no boundaries with the physical area, and then we're like, oh my gosh, I accidentally went way too far. Yeah. Wonder how that happened. So I don't know. Do you guys have any feedback? If you're talking to a high schooler or middle schooler, asking for advice, what would you say are some hypothetical, some good starting places for physical boundaries?
So if I'm talking to somebody like one-on-one and they're like, hey, how do I know if I've gone too far? My first question to you is, okay, do you feel conviction? that's a good sign. That's
Yeah.
a real solid sign. You might have gone too
Like
far.
the Holy Spirit's working on you, saying, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, like if you're sitting there questioning, have I gone too far? Might
There's a
want to
good
take a step
chance.
back.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, it's like, well, how do I know my boundaries? You know,
Yeah.
I'm talking to the guys. You know,
Yeah.
don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to others. You know.
Yeah. If you're a follower of Jesus, right? Like if you're a Christian who is indwelt with the Holy Spirit and he's convicting you of your sin here and there and saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. But the other way is sometimes we harden our heart to sin, and we harden our heart to God's conviction. So like with Samson and Delilah, it says that Samson kept like pushing those buttons and getting further and further away from God, and he was sinning over and over again. And so finally when God left him, his hair was cut, that last piece of the vow was broken. When God left him, it says that Samson didn't even notice. He had hardened his heart so much to that sin that he didn't even recognize when the perfect, holy God who was empowering him with that strength pieces out. And I think it's because he just hardened his heart to that conviction, and God had been telling him over and over again, and he'd ignored him long enough to where his heart was numb to that. And so sometimes, like you said, the Holy Spirit convicts you, albeit there are times when we can harden our heart to that, and that's not a place you want to be. But I usually make people blush when I use this example, but the truth is, whether you're a guy or a girl, your body has a natural way of telling. I'm just looking at the ceiling while I say this.
Yeah.
Your body has a natural way of telling you that you have gone too far.
Amen.
Your body starts preparing for what is next. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm talking about, then you're guilty as charged right there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's great. Ask your parents, or don't ask your parents. I don't know. But like your biology betrays you.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm perfectly fine. Well, no, you're not. Like, there is evidence that you're not perfectly fine right now. So, sometimes you're like, oh, I can't believe you went there. Well, like our bodies are designed by God. Mm-hmm. God wants us to live holy and righteous before him. And I think sometimes he's like, hey, I'm going to give you like a heads up that, you're heading for trouble. And maybe like if you're starting, if your heart's pounding in a certain way and your hands are shaking, like, does that happen all the time? No, it happens when you have some intentions of going somewhere or doing something that you probably shouldn't do. I heard somebody say, what do you guys think of this? I'm not saying this is the rule. I'm not saying this is, thus saith the Lord. I just heard this one time. Somebody said, hey, if it should be covered by a bathing suit, you shouldn't touch it. What do you guys think of that? Push back, argue? It's not a bad ground rule.
It's not a bad ground rule, but I don't think it should be the only.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say so either.
I don't think that should be your limitations.
Right.
it's
it's not technically. I found there's this bathing suit here that doesn't cover it, so I can. No, I don't think that's the right way either.
I don't know if we're saying I don't think you need it, because that raises the question. Oh, 2-piece or 1-piece? Because then you have
yeah. Then again, you're asking how much can I get away with?
Exactly. So it's like, I think your boundary is just like what you're saying is biology will betray you. I like that. That's
yeah.
It's true. Biology will
tell on you.
Betray you. And if you're sitting there trying to hug the line, you're dancing with sin.
Right.
And that's like,
yeah,
plain and simple.
You're already sinning in your heart, most likely. Jesus said, hey, if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. And so, again, it goes back to our heart, goes back to the motives. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking about physical boundaries.
Yeah.
And maybe if you've got some questions or you want to push back or you want to argue with us, you can do it in the comments, or you can send us a message. And I'll just send it straight to Campbell and be like,
Amen.
Campbell, they think that you're crazy. Sophia, you said, hey, I want to maybe tackle emotional boundaries. Mm-hmm. What are some emotional boundaries that the guys or girls could have in a dating relationship?
So I think for that, I wouldn't only talk to your boyfriend or girlfriend about every problem or everything that's going on in your life. I think when you become dependent on them and their responses, you're putting them in a place that they don't have any business being in as like an overall authority. Like, you should talk to God primarily, first and foremost. I think you should get their opinion. But I also think that that we're all just humans, and sometimes we do make mistakes. And I'm gonna be honest, I've given bad advice before. Like,
Sure,
I just
same.
have, and I'm sure everybody has. So I think it's important. I can really think I'm right, and then turns out later I'm like, you know what, that was stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure everyone on this podcast can agree.
Have you ever heard somebody say, like, maybe you ask somebody for advice? Have you ever had somebody tell you, I don't think I have any good advice on that topic. I don't know that I have, the answers to that question. Has anybody ever told you that before?
Thank
Really?
God, yes.
I've told people that too.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I just need to find some better friends. But like, there are certain people I'm like, I've asked them 100 questions. They've never once said, I don't think I'm the best person. I haven't figured that out yet. That takes some humility. But yeah, you don't need to confide solely in that boyfriend or girlfriend. Would you say there's sometimes like an age factor to this, and even physical boundaries or things like that? Like, I'm not saying like you can be inappropriate physically when you're older, but like maybe if you've been dating for 5 years and you're 23 years old, there are some things that you can talk to that significant other about that it just wouldn't be wise to talk to them about when you're 16 and you've only been dating for 6 months. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think as you spend more time with them and you're dating for longer, you trust them more and there's more things you can talk about. And I think some things probably shouldn't really be talked about until you're really serious about, do you really want to marry them? Like, if you're like, yeah, like when I got to a place when I was like, okay, I really think that I want to marry Campbell. Like, I prayed about it. I think he's the right one. There were conversations I had with him. I'd be like, you should know this about me. Like, you should know about this kind of stuff that took a little bit of time to build up that conversation. So I definitely think, and they also, I feel like kind of emotionally and socially might go together, that they shouldn't be the only person you talk to. They shouldn't be the only person you spend time with. I've seen a lot of people who are Christians, who are raised in the church, who they start dating someone, whether they're a Christian or they're not, and they only spend time with them. They don't see anyone else.
Ghost all their other friends.
And yes, and it leads them down a very bad path, and some people don't come back from that. And some people do. I think the Lord can still work in their lives, and I think it just puts yourself in a dangerous situation because you're also cutting yourself off from community. I think it's a problem if you don't know how the person you're dating acts around other people, acts around your friends, acts around your family, acts around other people in the church, acts around like a guy, how he acts around other women, how knowing if you're comfortable with that. Me and Campbell have a relationship where we can talk about things, and I feel comfortable, like some things that me and Campbell have agreed with, other people disagree with, that they just won't do for their relationship. For example, I can go get coffee with some of my guy friends, just the two of us, and go chat and catch up on our lives, and that's something we discussed, and we are okay with that. Whereas I have other really good friends, and I think they have, they have great convictions, and their conviction is, hey, that would make me very uncomfortable if my husband went and got coffee with another girl. Whereas I don't think there's anything sinful in that, just catching up and being friends. It just kind of depends on the convictions of your relationships.
Yeah.
So I think, having those conversations, and I feel like with this topic of boundaries, that's something you should talk about at the very beginning of your relationship. Like, what are our boundaries? So like we're kind of talking about what the boundaries are right now, but also just saying, figuring out what the stricter boundaries are. If your boundary is you don't want, I don't know, wait, that's a dumb one. I'm not going to say that.
I don't know. There's some dumb boundaries, but I think some of the things that we say are dumb are like things that like would have saved us from some headaches here and there. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Well, I think what I was going to say is, like, if someone sets a boundary saying, like, you shouldn't, like, if I was talking to Campbell and I was like, our boundary is I don't want you to speak to any other woman ever. Like, that's a boundary. That's a sinful boundary. Like, we're called to be in community with men and women. That's a boundary that I would not want to be a part of.
Now you're treating other women like they're a sin for existing. Yeah, no,
yes.
I see what you're saying. I think another factor that we've got to consider when we're talking about emotional boundaries is like the secrets that we tell one another and the information that we unload on some people. I'll just use as a personal testimony. There was somebody that I was talking to when I was like a freshman in high school, and we didn't see each other in person a whole lot, but we messaged each other like 500 times a day, and it was kind of absurd. It was ridiculous, and we got to this point where we'd only been quote unquote talking for like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, but we reached this point where we're like, well, shoot, I kind of know everything there is to know about you. And you kind of know everything there is to know about me. Like, we've just been unloading all this information about like likes and dislikes and fears and, goals in life. And, what's your family like? And we're like, we are out of things to talk about. Right. And so we were like, this has been fun, but now you're not interesting anymore. You know what I mean? And this person was wonderful. They're a good person. But I think there's just wisdom in saying, hey, I don't need to tell this person everything that there is about me right now. Like it's okay for there to be a little bit of mystery. And I think it would be really sad if, one day we get married to somebody and you're like, hey, I'm ready to share my life with you. I'm ready for you to know everything there is to know about me. Also, 25 other guys or 25 other girls also know these things about me, right? So my deepest, darkest secrets are not actually that deep or dark, and they're not that secretive. So we're talking about physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, but let's talk about spiritual boundaries, because I think this is something that actually gets a lot of us who are dating in church in trouble. And it doesn't make sense for it to, but it does. So what are some good spiritual boundaries, which almost sounds like an oxymoron?
So I think first and foremost, your relationship with the Lord is your relationship with the Lord. I love y'all, but your boyfriend and your girlfriend is not your priest. They are not the way to God.
Wow.
You need to pray on your own, and you need to have your own quiet time.
They're not your accountability partner.
They're
Hello.
not. You're not accountability partner. You should have other people around you who are your accountability partner, but that boyfriend, girlfriend,
that's toxic.
not it.
Is what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, I just really needed to confide in you. I'm just being honest that I am struggling by being tempted by you. I've actually heard of people saying that.
Yeah.
Like I know people, I'll say it, guys are the ones who are usually guilty of that, and maybe they think in some way that's virtuous, but I think more than anything it's controlling and manipulative.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not your accountability. Like you are in charge of your own faith.
Yeah, and to the guys who are like, you're tempting me, check your heart.
Yeah.
Because
well, then gouge out your eyes, because that's what Jesus said to do. I think this is, Janae and I even encountered this when we were dating. We were at a Bible college, serving Jesus together, and we were like, hey, we're going to do a quiet time together and things like that. And I think we started realizing whoa, we're getting close to one another way faster than we thought we were. We're starting to struggle with temptation more than we thought we were. And I think we're getting ready to start wrapping some of these things up in a bow and tie this up. But I think what we started to realize is that all of these three avenues for a relationship, physical, emotional, and spiritual, they're really intertwined. And we were treating some of them as if they were unique and all by themselves. And we're like, well, physical, that's bad. Can't touch, don't make out, don't do that stuff. Emotional, we'll be responsible with what we share with one another. But then spiritual, I'm going to pray with you. we're going to read our Bibles together. Meanwhile, doing that made us more attracted to one another physically. And we're like, dang, this is getting difficult. And it's because all of those things are intertwined. They're all a part of the relationship and the way that it progresses, the speed with which it progresses.
Yeah.
But Campbell, something you've told me about, you've talked about having what you call an open door policy. How would you describe that? What is an open door policy?
So an open door policy applies to dating. Pretty much what it is.
Not married.
No, that door's locked,
I
shut,
think that
and
means
barricaded.
something different.
Yeah, so that
yeah.
door's locked, shut, and barricaded. There's no open door policy in marriage. So an open door policy is whenever y'all start dating, like we kind of said at the beginning, it's designed to end. So either you're walking out that door down the altar, or you're walking out that door hopefully edified. And
better off than you were before.
Yeah.
Not,
because if you date well, you can point someone to Jesus and date, and you can walk away stronger from that relationship if you maintain certain boundaries and keep that intention and goal in mind.
Nothing you're really regretting all that much. Yeah.
You don't really. You don't have bad blood.
Yeah. Right.
Because you were able to pull away and be like, oh, this person didn't pull away because they hate me. This person didn't pull away because
they cheated or something.
X, Y,
like
Z.
that. Yeah.
They pulled away because they're like, hey, you're gonna make a great wife. Someone else.
Yeah.
Just stuff stuff like that. So just being willing.
Is that kind of what an open door
Yeah. So just kind of having
policy says?
Yeah, just kind of having that ability to freely at any point in the relationship saying, hey, I don't think you're the person I want to marry. I don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste my time. Let's just go ahead and, not hurt each other more.
Agree to separate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, just knowing that there's always an open door until you're married.
Oh, yeah.
the open door doesn't just automatically shut one day when if we were talking and we're like, yeah, you know what, we think we're going to get married. And then like things come up, and the more we date, the longer we date. I think sometimes people go very quickly and they're like, yes, I know everything about you and I want to get married, and we've been dating for a week, and like, this is it. Close the door, seal the deal. And then as you spend more time together and you pray about it more, you realize, oh no, this is not right. This is not what I should be doing. And they're like, oh, it's too late. There is no out.
No,
but there
we already
is.
made too many commitments and promises.
Yes, there is until you're married.
Yeah. Well, I've heard some people say, like, I don't know, maybe you guys have heard about this. Like people who break off an engagement, like sometimes like days or weeks before the wedding. And on one hand, I'm like, ooh, that had to be like really tense. But on the other hand, I'm like, that had to take a lot of courage.
Yeah.
Like good for that person to be able to say, hey, I know that this is not right, but I'm not going to just go ahead with it because I'm worried of what other people will think.
Yeah.
Those people forget, those people move on, but you would be with that person forever until one of you dies. Like, because that's what we're promising, till death do you part. But then I've heard other people explain it, how that door is closed once you're married. And I've heard people say, hey, like, divorce is not even on the table for us. It's not an option.
Yeah.
I've got some good friends who routinely say, listen, if anything ever happens with us, we're going to drag one another's butts to counseling until, we figure this thing out. But like, we are not getting divorced. This is not even an option. I love that. So, but what you're saying is like, kind of have an open hand, so to speak.
Yeah.
Say, hey, I'm not going to grip this too tightly. If the Lord starts leading you or me away from this relationship, like I'm going to trust him with that. I think, Campbell, maybe you've seen this before. I think guys especially, we really struggle with over-promising and making promises that we have no business making because honestly, we don't know if we can keep. So what are some ways that we can unintentionally or intentionally make some promises that we don't really have any business making? Campbell or Sophia?
I think sometimes people get really excited, and I know that's something I'm guilty of. I get really excited about things and talk about things without really thinking it through. So I think that's a big problem. I think sometimes people, I've seen people say, oh yeah, let's get married, but let's get engaged. Let's get this, let's get the party going, which is a good thing. But then if you don't think it all the way through of like, how would we actually do this? How are we going to pay for this? Where would we live? Like actually thinking the minutia of how you actually do that. I think sometimes people jump and skip steps, and then they start making promises and they start saying things that they can't keep because they haven't really thought it all the way through. And I think that all comes back to getting wisdom from other people, to praying, and just keeping all that in mind. I think when you start to skip steps is when it really gets you in trouble, because then you start saying things like...
Get the cart ahead of the horse. That's how my grandpa would say it.
Yes. Yeah. So I think... Yeah, I just think sometimes people get really excited, and that's something I'm guilty of too. You get so excited, and then you say all these things, and then you have nobody to actually keep what you're saying. And I think that can be really hurtful. I know it was hurtful for me sometimes when me and Campbell would talk about things, and if one of us felt like there was an expectation that was set, that it really hurt one or the other of us when that expectation was broken.
Right. So sometimes I think, like, even by saying like, "Hey, we're gonna get married one day," it's like, well, have you asked the dad yet? And that doesn't mean you're like, I'm imminently asking, hey, may I marry her right now? But it might be like, hey, have you told her dad that like that's the plan in the next 2 or 5 year period? You know what I'm saying? Like, he might say no, and what are you gonna do if he says no? Are you willing to like tear that family apart? Do you have the budget to do that? And I'm not one of these people who says like you have to be perfectly financially stable before you get engaged, because nobody's perfectly financially stable. But are you financially stable enough that like you can put food and water on the table and there's a roof over your head, But sometimes we're like, when we get married, or this is how many kids we're going to have, what do we want to name our kids? Like sometimes we do it unintentionally, and we're not trying to make it. We don't even sometimes feel like we're making a promise, but we are setting up an expectation in someone's heart. Oh, we're going to have kids. Oh, well, and we're going to name them such and such. Well, then when you break up, and you might not think you're going to break up, but then when you break up, all that comes crashing down, and there's a lot of collateral damage. Yeah. So this has been really fun. I'm not trying to like rush us out of this podcast, because I was just telling you guys earlier, we only do one podcast a month. You got all month to listen to this podcast. Hopefully you're finishing it eventually. But anything else to say as far as guardrails, guidelines, boundaries? I don't know if we should have picked a word. But any other pieces of advice for dating, relationships, all the above?
I just say definitely pray about your convictions, kind of before even the idea of dating either a specific person or in general, kind of knowing your limits, knowing what's important to you, and having that conversation very early. I'd recommend even having it before you're like officially boyfriend and girlfriend, because again, if someone has a boundary that you don't want to keep, then there's no business for you to date. Like if that person has a boundary, like if a guy or a girl were to say, well, I don't want you to speak to another guy or girl, you know,
Like,
that's not a boundary.
I would have liked to know that before we signed up. Yeah.
Yes. Which of course, if you signed up for dating, you can just get out of that. Like Campbell said, there's an open door policy. Like you don't have to stay in a relationship that you know you shouldn't be in, but just kind of laying everything on the table. And just seeing if those kind of align, and like you said, like talking about that goal. Hey, here's our goal. Oh, this isn't your goal. Hey, it was really nice meeting up with you. I'll see you around.
Right,
you know, this isn't for me.
I wish you the best.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Campbell? Anything else to add?
Well, I think first and foremost, you need to be like focusing on the Lord. Mark Sontag, I'm gonna call on him. Senior year of high school and teams on Wednesday night. I another, visual I'll never forget was he was talking about a book called "What He Must Be If He Wants to Marry My Daughter." I think is what the title of the book is, and he started talking about this corn maze, this idea of the corn maze, where you're trying to navigate it, and in life sometimes people will come up and walk with you. When you're married, that person's stuck there.
Yeah.
And so he's like, so sometimes when you're dating, like someone might come along and that might be a time that they can sharpen you, but that also might be a time they confuse you. So he's like, just be intentional about where your focus is when you're navigating this maze. Are you going to be navigating with this person towards Christ to finish the maze? Or are you going to be navigating with this person to get lost more in the maze?
Right.
So that's just something to kind of like consider, like, am I learning more about Jesus through this relationship? Am I growing closer to God in this relationship? Or am I getting distracted?
Yeah.
Is my quiet time getting hindered? Like, you don't have to break up if your quiet time is getting hindered, but you should definitely start
address that.
Address it. Yeah. There might be a point where you have to, but I'd say, like, first and foremost, the goal in life is to seek God and to bring him glory and honor in all things. And you can do that in anything with the right heart.
Right.
But with that, there are still boundaries, and God still has his law that we must follow. So, don't break the law trying to glorify God.
That makes a lot of sense.
So,
yeah. And so, guys, I hope that this has been a helpful conversation to you. If you're watching or listening to this, make sure you subscribe and be on the lookout for the next episode. And we're putting out all kinds of other content on Wednesdays and short videos as well. But I hope that this has helped you as you think about dating and relationships and all of those kind of good things. We're incredibly thankful for you, Campbell and Sophia, for sharing your story and some of what God has taught you along the way when you were single and then dating and engaged and married. And so we're really glad that you guys are here at our church. We will talk to you real soon. Like I said, be on the lookout for the next episode.